Hello there, this is video number 3 for the Wwise Audio State Manager tutorial using Unity. So just as a quick reminder of what this audio manager will do, we'll have enums to manage states, along with some custom methods that limit the amount of state changes that we can do via the use of that enum. We'll have a way to manage our startup sound banks in a list. We will make some methods to post global or object events, and what that allows us to do is wrap them around the base audio kinetic methods so that we can include some custom error messaging. After all of that's done, I'll be making an input manager that just uses the numbers across the top of the keyboard, as well as the backspace and the minus key button to just switch the different game states or the different music states, and then check using the text-to-speech events that we made what music state or what gameplay state that we're currently in. As an optional thing too, we'll look at adding the read-only properties that allow us to see which state that we're in for both the gameplay state and the music state, so that they show up in the inspector but they're not editable by us. So I realized there were a couple things that I forgot to do last time, and namely that is that we need to go back to Wwise, and while we had these text-to-speech items routed to the voice bus, we did not route the music main switch to the music bus. In order to get the ducking effect, we're going to have to set that up. And then also I had forgotten to set up the different filter effects for the different gameplay states. So we'll go ahead and do that now that we've set up the different buses. So we can go to states on the master audio bus. We'll add the state group game state. Game over, we did a, what was it originally? A low pass and a high pass filter. So let's do 40 for both. Oh no, that one was just the low pass filter. We'll do that. For gameplay and main menu, we leave it alone. And then for pause, we do the radio effect of low pass and high pass filter. So now that we have that set up, we can check in the Soundcaster how that's going to affect the audio. We want to change our gameplay state to game over. That's a low pass filter. We could get even more intense with that. Let's do 60. Yeah. And paused. Okay, that feels pretty good. Okay. Now the Wwise project is done. We want to go back to our sound bank, generate the sound bank so that we're up to date. Now we can go back to Unity and focus on the audio manager script. So back over here in Unity, we have an empty scene, and we can make a new empty game object. We can call it, not caps lock, audio manager. And not that this matters, we'll just reset the transform. And then we'll add a component that's a new script. And we'll call it audio manager. And that will put it actually in the assets folder by default. So let's go ahead and move that to our scripts folder. And where are you? Yep, here we go. Okay, so we've got our blank script here. And before we get started, let me just briefly explain the Singleton pattern. What it allows us to do is create a static instance of a class. And that allows us to say that this exists in one place in memory, so we can access it from anywhere, any of our scripts. And then we set it up so that once there is an instance that exists, if we try to make another one, that new instance will check to see if instance is not null, so if it exists already. And if it does, then it'll just destroy itself. And then that way we only ever have one, and it'll persist. And the way that we'll set this up too is that we'll put it in a don't destroy on load, so it will just be there the entire session of play. Okay? So let's go ahead and set that up. So the method that we'll set that up in will be a new one that we'll call void initialize. Ooh, don't want that. Void initialize. And I'll put a comment here saying Singleton logic. And so we need a public variable of instance that will be of type audio manager. So we'll have a public static audio manager and call it instance, or you can call it I a lot of the time is what's common. And what we're going to do here is if instance is equal to null, instance equals this. So if the instance doesn't exist yet, we'll set it to this new instance that we instantiate. And we'll set it to don't destroy on load as well. This. So we need to wrap that in curly brackets now, since we have 2 lines. All right. Now, if an instance already does exist, then what do we want to do? Well, we want to take that new instance, recognize that there is an existing instance, and just destroy ourselves. So we can put a debug message saying something like audio manager already exists, destroying new instance, and then destroy this. So then that way it will recognize that instance isn't null. That means that an instance exists, and then it will just destroy itself. Next, we can have some other initialization in there. That's to load the sound banks. So what we're going to need for that is a Boolean that will just track whether or not we've run the initialization method. So that'll be a private bool b is initialized. And then we also want a list of our sound banks. The list of type ak.wise.bank. There we go. Now we have a list of sound banks, and we can call it sound banks. All right, but we want to be able to assign that in the inspector, and so we can do that by adding serialize field before our declaration there. So let's pop back over to Unity and see what that looks like. So the fact that it's private means that we're not going to be able to set the values on it with any other scripts, which is good because we shouldn't really need to change the startup sound banks. That should always just be assigned prior to the play session. But making it serializable allows us to set up on the prefab. Using the inspector here, we can set which sound banks we have. So we could even do that right now. We only have 1, so we'll change the size to 1 and set it to our main sound bank. Cool. And let's go ahead, since we're here, we have this audio manager, we can make it into a prefab. So just drag it down to our prefabs here. And then we'll continue editing on the prefab so that we don't accidentally delete the one that's in the scene and lose all of our assignments there. And another little neat thing that we can do is that to organize this, we can put a header, startup sound banks, and then that will allow us to see in Unity. Now it's got a nice little label on it. Cool, so let's move on to finishing our initialize logic here, and we'll say if not b is initialized, So if it hasn't been initialized yet, we will look at our sound banks. If soundbanks dot count is greater than 0, so making sure that we have sound banks, then we can do a for each loop. For each ak.wise .bank dot load. Okay. Why doesn't that work? Oh, I need to say for each bank in the list sound banks. Okay. So first we're checking to make sure that we have sound banks. Otherwise, there'd be no reason to run this. And then for each one in the list, go ahead and load it up. And we can add a error message now saying else debug.log error soundbank list or soundbanks list is empty. Are the banks assigned to the audio manager? Or something like that. So then in our console we'll see, oh, it's set to 0. We don't have any banks to load. Cool. And then once all that's done, we can set the is initialized to true. All right, and then I forgot up here, we want to make sure that b is initialized is set to false by default, which I think it would be anyway, but just in case. Okay. Now that we have that done, let's put it in the awake method. So void awake, and we'll run initialize. And I guess we could in here also put a debug.log, just saying start up sound banks have been loaded. Just so that we know that that ran, I guess. Okay. So actually, to clean this up a little bit, rather than having this for each loop in here, we can just refactor this so that it's got its own little method. So we can do void load sound banks. And then we'll go ahead and put all of that here to refactor it. And then we'll just put load sound banks as a method inside of this if not initialized condition here. So that cleans it up. Just makes it easier to look at what's going on and gives everything its own little place there. Okay. So we want to first set up our game state variables, then our music state variables, and then we'll set up our events. And then eventually we'll get around to the read-only properties that allow us to see which current game state we're in. So let's go ahead and make another private ak.wise.state, and we'll call this game I guess game underscore just for game state and gameplay. Copy this. We need another one for main menu. Another one for game over, and another one for paused. Okay, and now let's do our music states. Music underscore gameplay. What else was there? Level start, level win, level lose, and paused, I think. Music level start. Music level win. Music level lose. And music pause menu. And we can give these headers. Header game state variables. This one is music state variables. Oh, first need to denote that that is a header and put that in parentheses. Okay, but these are all private, so they're not going to show up in the inspector. We need to add this serialized field to all of these. Okay, now you can see they're not grayed out anymore because they're accessible. Okay, so let's see what that looks like in Unity now. So we've got our gameplay, or game state variables and music state variables, and they're not assigned to anything yet, so we can go ahead and assign those. Pops up the Wwise picker here, just like with our Soundbank. So we can assign our game state gameplay, game state main menu, game state game over, game state paused, and I guess we might as well add the none while we're at it. I don't really know how useful that might be, but maybe you need it for something. So might as well have it. So we'll have a game, none, and a music, none. Okay, go back to Unity. Go back to Unity. All right. Set that to game state none. And we set up our music states. We had what? Oh wait, we had gameplay as one of them. Level start, win, lose, pause menu, oh, and main menu. So let's go ahead and fix. Actually, we don't need to fix that yet. We know that it's main menu. We'll go ahead and assign it to that. Main menu. Level start. Level win. Level lose. Pause menu. And none. Okay. Now let's go ahead and fix what it's called. So we actually want it to be music main menu, which makes more sense because these are all gameplay music. Oh, and it does clear that out if we change the name, so that's good to know. So we can go ahead and set that to main menu now. All right. So we have our Soundbank, a way to load it in the initialize method. And now we have our game state variables and our music state variables. So that's pretty cool. Now let's look at how we want to be able to change between these different states. And here's the main thing, the main point of these videos that I wanted to show you is that we can use enums and then make custom methods on this audio manager that will take in those enums, which limits what type of information we can give them, so that we know we have this limited list of possibilities to set our sound banks to, and this method requires that limited list in order to work. So up at the top, above our class declaration, we can make our two enums, and they'll be public enums so that we can access them everywhere, not pubic, public. Enum, and we can call this Wwise music, or no, let's do gameplay state first. Wwise game state. And we'll set our values in just a minute. We'll have our public enum Wwise music state. Okay. I don't think we need those, but just in case. So we have gameplay, main menu, game over, referencing this list here, paused, and none. Now in our music states, we have main menu, level start, not state, level start, level win, level lose, and pause menu, and none. Alright, so we have our enums set up, and we're going to use those in some custom methods. So we'll have a void set Wwise game state, and that needs to take in the argument of type Wwise game state, the enum value that we just set up. We'll call it game state. Cool. And what we're going to do here is we're going to set up a switch logic that will just check what's the enum value that we're at, and then based on that, set which state variable to load that we have already assigned at the top. So I'll go ahead and set that up. We have a switch that's going to be looking at the value of game state. So as our case, our first case here, we have Wwise game state dot main menu, and if that is our case, then what we'll do is first of all, let's go ahead actually and copy this over and over again, because we're gonna have to do it a bunch of times. So if that's the case, then we'll want to get our game underscore main menu state and use dot set value. That is a method that's available on the Wwise game state type variable class, or Wwise game state class. And then next one we have what, gameplay. So Wwise game state gameplay. We have game underscore gameplay, not game over, gameplay dot set value. What do we have next? Game over, okay. Game over dot set value. And what else do we have? Paused. Game underscore paused dot set value. And then the last one we had was none. do game underscore none dot set value. And then we can pick a default so that it will go to that one if there's no value being passed in. If the game state is not set to a valid value, then we'll by default go to main menu. And the way that we do that is we can put default above that. And now it knows that this is the default case that we'll set it to main menu. Cool. So we have that. Oh, and we want to make that public actually, so that we can go ahead and use that method in other scripts. And now we need to make one for music. So let's go ahead and copy this whole thing because it's going to be basically the same idea. And we'll call it setWise music state. And we need an enum type of wise music state. We'll call this music state. So this is going to be tedious, just kind of swapping out words. So I'll probably speed this up because I think you get the idea. Call this music state. That's the value we're interested in. Now I have to change all these, so I might as well go ahead and delete all this. Okay, and we're going to default to our main menu state. So that looks good as well. Cool, so now we've got our two methods set up, and that's the core of this whole video tutorial series. One more thing that we can do to these is that we can check with a simple Boolean for each of these whether or not we should bother running through that switch statement, because we can store what our current state is, and then if we're already set to that state, then we don't need to look through the switch. We can just be like, oh, we're already in that state. We don't need to run anything else. So I'm going to make some private booleans up here. So under game state, we can do a private bool current game state. And then another private bool current music state. Okay, and bring those down here so we can check this is our game state. If game state is equal to current game state, then all that we'll do is we're going to return, but first we'll put, oh, that's right, we're done. We're not using a Boolean, but we are using a Boolean check. So these values, actually, we want to go ahead and use our enums for these. So actually it'll be a private wise game state. Call that current game state, and then a private wise music state. And that's our current music state. Okay. Okay, so if our value that's getting passed in is equal to our current game state, which the first time around that's going to be nothing, then we'll debug .log game state is already, and then we'll do game state. And add a period. Okay, so it should say game state is already whatever the enum value is that's getting passed into it, and then it'll return, which means it stops here, and we won't even bother going through the switch. However, if that's not the case, we'll continue, and then in order to make that work, then we need to set our current game state to equal game state, which is the value that's passed into our method right here. Cool. So we'll do the same thing down here. So I'll just copy this condition. And we need music state. We need to check our music state, Wwise music state enum value, and compare that against the value which we will store in just a moment. Change this to music state. And then we need to set our current music state to music state. Okay, maybe there'd be better names to give these to make it a little less tedious and confusing, but I hope you understand and are following along fine. Cool. So to recap, we have this switch statement that's going to be taking in our Wwise for the game state. It's a unique enum for the Wwise game state. We have to pass in a value for that. It'll check if it's the same value as one that we store, and if it is, then it'll just print this debug log, and it will switch to whatever our new state is, and then it'll store that down here as our current game state. And then the exact same thing is going on with our music state, just that the enum is different. I guess one other thing we could do is debug.log switching our new Wwise game state a period, because punctuation, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but there we go. We'll do that down here as well. Wwise music state, and we'll have our music state. So we can go ahead and use these already now in our initialize method. And so just so that we can immediately set our states. And then also we want to be able to start our music, actually, which we haven't set that event property up yet, but we'll do that in a second. So before I mentioned I couldn't really think of a reason why you would need none, but this is a great reason right here. Actually, when we do initialize, we can set the music states to none. I can't really think of a situation necessarily where there'd be some sort of carryover data, but maybe if you were, I don't know, somehow if a state got stuck, then when you run initialize, it'll set everything to none, and then in a moment in start, we will set it to the values that we want at the default of starting play. So we can go ahead and use these new methods that we just made. So I have set Wwise game state. We'll be passing in the Wwise game state enum, and we'll do Wwise game state.none. So that's cleared out, and then set Wwise music state to Wwise music state dot none, and then we'll say we're initialized. Okay. Then in start, we're going to want to set those to our main menu states. I know this is broken looking. next episode. Okay, set Wwise game state, takes in Wwise game state dot set it to main menu. And Wwise music state. We're going to set our Wwise music state to Wwise music state dot main menu as well. Alrighty, and I think, yeah, we do not need the update method for anything in here, so we'll go ahead and get rid of that. Where you might use the update method is if you were using this audio manager also to track an RGPC for something global, let's say like a day-night cycle, or even, let's say, sliders for volume of different buses that you set up. Okay, so now we want to set up our different Wwise events that we haven't touched at all yet. So let's go ahead and we'll make another header. And I'll call this Wwise music events. Serialized field. Private ak.wwise.event. And we have our text-to-speech events, so I'll call them check game state. Go ahead and copy this, and then we'll have a check music state also. And then we've also got our... Oh, wait, I mixed those up. Let's call these Wwise voice events. And then we have our Wwise music events that are just going to be play music and stop music. Let's go ahead and call it main music, just in case we had something else. So we'll do play main music, or even better, main music, play main music, stop. Okay, so let's hop over back into Unity. We need to assign our Wwise event variables here, their values. So we have our game state TTS, our music state TTS, and then play main music and stop main music. Okay. So with the way things are set up now, I believe all we need to do is on start now, we also want to go ahead and let's do main music underscore play dot post, and we can do it on our audio manager game object. We're going to change this in a little bit with a custom method, but this works just fine for now, and generally this is fine to do it like this. It's actually really nice that Audio Kinetic has set it up to work like that. Anyway, so I'll start play mode, and the music immediately will play. We don't have any way to use the keys or anything to switch it just yet. That's why I'll need to make the input manager. But you should hear it, or you'll see that it loads the sound bank because it'll work. Then, as part of this initialize method, it will clear out the Wwise game states, and then it will set them to main menu. So we should see that also in the log. And then, of course, we'll hear the music too. Let's clear this. That's from old ones that I did. Okay. So it said startup soundbanks have been loaded. Wwise game state none. Wwise music state none. They both get set to main menu. Not sure what this stuff is. Interesting. Let's try that again. Do those still pop up then? I think that's like a device console log. No, that's fine. Maybe just needed to switch audio devices. Okay, so we'll go ahead and stop it here for this one for today. The audio manager is all set up. The only thing that we haven't done yet is introduce some new custom methods for posting the events, but I can cover that in the next video when I go through the input manager as well. For now, this I think is quite a good template for an audio manager in most games that aren't too complex. So I hope this is really helpful to you and that you can use something like this in your own projects. Next time I will cover the input manager as well as some new custom methods to post the events. And then we'll go ahead and show everything like I did in the intro video of pressing the buttons, checking the music states, checking the game states, having those different effects apply, and actually changing the states, obviously. Okay, so I hope you found this useful and educational. And if you know better ways of doing these things, I'm completely open to that and would like to know. In the meantime, until next time, make cool sounds, make cool games, all that fun stuff, and take care of yourselves. All right? See you later.